People usually think that dogmatism has to start with shouting, or it has to start with fanatism. But it doesn't begin with those two. It doesn't even begin with certainty. Dogmatism begins quietly when a belief stops being something you hold and starts being something that holds you. At first, it feels like stability, like finally standing on the solid ground. But there is a moment, very rarely noticed, when questioning a belief no longer feels intellectual. It feels personal. That's the moment belief stops being about the world and starts being about identity. And basically, from that point on, the belief is no longer evaluated, it's defended. And we need to talk now why beliefs become so untouchable. Because most people like to think they believe things because they examine them carefully and truly. But belief rarely actually begins with reason. And David Hume pointed this out very well. What we call reason is usually a tool of justification, not discovery. Beliefs form through habit, right? They have formed through repetition, through emotional comfort and familiarity. And basically, once a belief is woven into like your social group or your moral self image, or even your sense of being a good or competent person, well, questioning it becomes costly on the existential level. Because at this point, you don't really risk being wrong, but you risk losing coherence. So the belief stops asking questions. It doesn't even have the answers. It's not because of that, but because the price of doubt is simply too high. And behind all this, there is actually this sort of illusion of strength, I would say. And this illusion is really dangerous part because an unquestioned belief, well, it feels calm. There is no friction, no tension, no internal resistance. That calmness is easily mistaken for strength. But calm simply is not strength, it's often just insulation. A belief protected from challenge feels solid for the same reason a muscle protected from resistance feels relaxed. Well, it simply hasn't been tested. And over time, stillness starts to look like certainty, and that certainty starts to look like truth. But nothing alive stays strong by being kept safe. And and the knowledge simply the knowledge requires risk, and this is where we need to call help from Karl Popper's insights was uncomfortable but very simple. What makes an idea rational is not how confidently it's held, but how exposed it is to being wrong. Because knowledge survives by contact, knowledge survives by you need to expose it to resistance, to criticism. A belief that cannot be challenged cannot correct itself, and a belief that cannot correct itself, well, is no longer knowledge. Well, that's actually doctrine. That's the doctrine. The moment a belief becomes untouchable, it stops learning, and it doesn't even necessary to need to it doesn't even reach the truth, it just declare the conversation over. And all of this is being transferred from the minds to societies. Because at some point, all of this, it won't stay personal forever. When beliefs becomes identities, disagreement stops being informational. It becomes moral. And criticism feels like betrayal, questions feels like attacks, and this is where societies begin to fracture. It's not, I don't think it's about the people disagreements, but because the disagreement starts to feel dangerous, the disagreement itself. And once questioning is punished socially, once doubt costs you belonging, once critique is treated as hostility, well, what does thinking do? Thinking retreats at this point. And some people would argue that this is unity. I think it's silent rigidity. And behind all of this there is the real cost. Because dogmatism offers something very tempting, and that is psychological safety. Well, there is no uncertainty anymore, there is no vulnerability, there is no exposure, but the cost of that safety is understanding. And don't get this wrong, please. I'm not saying this is called to abandon your beliefs. This is called to stop protecting them from reality. Because the question here, we are not asking question which beliefs are true, right? We are asking question which beliefs do you avoid examining, not because the belief itself might be fragile, but because you might be. And that hesitation might feel like a failure of intelligence, but let me assure you, it's not that. That's the exact place where thinking begins.